Oh, you do, eh?
It's live. It's live now.
Okay, Mr. Chair, you can go ahead.
Okay, I guess I ought to get the agenda up, unless I were to be prompted. I suppose it's chair's remarks, and the chair's remarks. We've been so busy with so many things that I haven't had time to be prepared for this meeting. You know, one of the things we've been doing is the emerald ash borer, which I sent what I'd written about that around, and it had the effect of doubling the money that North Grenville allocated to emerald ash borer for the coming budget, so that at least had some effect. And I mean, it's just such a huge problem. So you consider that the chair's remarks.
Okay, thank you very much. We can move on to number 2, which is the approval of the agenda. And I did circulate a supplemental agenda, which will be the presentation from Angela. So if we can have a mover and a seconder for the supplemental and main agenda, with a move to handle number 8, the supplemental, right after this approval. So I will see
Bill
Bruce and
Smurl.
Bill and Alvin
is now
okay.
joining.
Thank you. Are there any other additions to the agenda? Hearing none, Mr. Chair, you can call your question for approval of the agenda and supplemental agendas as amended.
Is anybody opposed?
And I'm seeing none and no hands.
Bill Smurl.
Is now exiting.
We'll get Bill back in a second. Okay, with that, we can move on. I think I saw Ange join.
Yeah, I think I might have a little bit of a delay, Rhonda. It looks like that, at least. We'll see. So hopefully all goes well. So first, I have to apologize for anyone who's already heard this presentation at the board last week, forestry this morning, and now. So I don't know. I see FS. Is that Francois Saint-Amour or is that Fred Schuler?
It's Fred.
Okay, and well, Bill was on this morning as well, so maybe he will join us back or not, but he's heard the presentation a couple of times. Basically, I wanted to take a little bit of time, first of all, to thank you for your ongoing efforts and contributions to SNC during the global pandemic. It's certainly been a very busy year of field work, committee work, and just continuing all things conservation as you know, the sort of rules and things that we're coping with change day to day. So I do want to thank the board and staff for being such a good support to the organization to assure that we're able to achieve big things even in the midst of what could be global confusion. The Bill 229 is actually part of the provincial government's COVID bill. It dropped November 5th, and there's been a good amount of discussion on it since that time. Basically, Schedule 6 of this COVID Act bill proposes a number of changes to the Conservation Authorities Act. Now, there's a number of perspectives on the changes as well, so I'm going to try and give my most balanced presentation so that it's reflective of what I've heard from, you know, sort of the perspectives of different stakeholders. First, I also want to thank, whether it's through committee members, board members, or others within the community that have taken the time to submit thoughtful comments back to the government on this particular bill. Next slide, please. So I want you to know that I was just informed late yesterday that this bill has been referred to standing committee. So a standing committee has been struck for this particular bill. The standing committee will meet next Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So that's November 30th, December 1, and December 2 to discuss the amendments proposed to the Conservation Authorities Act under Bill 229. So substantively, I'll just go over a few of the changes, hopefully, with providing a little bit of discussion at the end of the presentation for those that may have questions. So again, referred to standing committee November 30th, December 1st, and December 2nd. That's next Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Anyone wishing to have standing before the special committee to hear specific submissions on Schedule 6 needs to make the request by November 25th, which is by my calendar tomorrow, and all written submissions are due by December 2nd, so that would be next Wednesday. Okay. Basically, sorry, did I hear a comment? Okay, I'll take questions as soon as the brief presentation is finished. That's perfect. The bill proposes some things that are not entirely a surprise based on the past consultations that have been completed by this government of conservation authorities in a few other proposed bills. Not all of those changes have come into effect, and not all of these changes have yet come into effect. So I suspect we're going to hear a number of discussions on this. So some of the main changes include some sort of uncharted territory in terms of board governance. The board governance piece itself basically states that the board of directors, as it currently sits, with the ability of a municipality to appoint citizen representatives to the board of directors. It's proposed that the legislation would remove that option and that all board of directors must be sitting members of council. Some councils are going to support that, and other councils are going to feel that's challenging. I think that that's, just reflective of the fact that we have 444 municipalities in Ontario, and it's challenging that it be one size fits all. The second part talks about the duty of the board of directors members, and that they act on behalf of their respective municipalities. I think that 99% of the time that probably is okay, and that the interests of the Conservation Authority would align with the municipal representative. However, there are some situations where that may be a challenge. And the third part of the board of directors composition involves the fact that the minister may appoint an additional member to the board of directors as a representative of the agricultural sector. And again, as a primarily watershed-based, an agricultural-based municipality, we've worked extensively with the agricultural community on whether it's on clean water and so forth. And we also made it known to past standing committees on this issue that a lot of times we have agricultural representation, whether members be councillors, elected officials that are agriculture or farm members as well. But again, these are not huge changes, but some municipalities may choose to comment on them. Next slide. And the programming, this is similar to a slate of programming we've seen in the past, making sure that conservation authorities provide mandatory programs and services for natural hazards, conservation management of lands owned by the conservation area, perform certain duties under the Clean Water Act, and other duties as prescribed by the regulations that are not yet draft. We are pleased to see that we can still enter into agreements with participating municipalities to provide those programs and services. And we just think here that while it may be necessary in some areas to enter into such agreements and have a lot of discussion, we do see it as a conservation authority that already has over 100 agreements for programs and services, and knowing what it takes to enter into all of those, something that may cause additional time and, eventually potentially even red tape to create a lot of additional new agreements, particularly the amount of time that goes into drafting the agreements, checking all the insurance provisions, and having multiple presentations to staff and then council to eventually approve a service contract. Next slide. Again, we're well rehearsed in that. We're probably one of the only conservation authorities in the province that already has 100 service agreements. So maybe we'll have less work perhaps to do in that regard, and that's certainly our hope. Now, you may or may not know that when a conservation authority makes a decision about protection of people and property and development in the floodplain, that those decisions can be appealed to a committee that is right now called the Mining and Lands Tribunal. It's been that way for a number of years, and it's now proposed that all permits will be appealable to the local planning appeal tribunal. There are some circumstances where that could cause conflicts. However, overall, I do think that that's not necessarily a bad decision, so long as LPAT is adequately resourced, and that again doesn't provide an additional delay in the permit process. Next slide. This is one of the more interesting pieces. It brings into a lot of questions of, will the Crown be, if they're making decisions in a watershed, will they be immune from their decision making, and will the municipalities and ultimately the conservation authorities hold the liability? But again, when we make a decision with respect to development and building into a floodplain, the ministers proposed will have a new power that they can come and overturn a board's decision under Section 28. That's the Conservation Authorities Act. So if a board, first if at the staff level, staff recommend a permit be denied, and then the board also recommends that the permit be denied, the person, instead of appealing that to what used to be Mining and Lands or the local planning tribunal, can now apply to the minister for the decision to be overturned, and the minister may decide to do that as according to his or her in the future purview. Again, quick comment on this. We have municipalities with development in the floodplain. We have municipalities that have had recent floods. So, you know, I hope that there is a more real type of urgence or real type of consideration to what are ultimately very important decisions with respect to safety of people and property and development in the floodplain. So this just shows an example. You may recall that not all of our watershed was included, and we did have the municipalities of Alfred Plantagenet do a complete expansion, as well as the municipality of Clarence Rockland do a complete expansion into the South Nation watershed, primarily because the development issues and the floods of 2017 and 19 really illustrated the need to be proactive in decision making as it relates to health and safety of residents as development is, sort of put as something that is desirable into floodplains. So we really do hope that this is very seriously considered, and if the minister does wish in those circumstances to make decisions, that the minister holds responsibility ultimately for what can be some very serious property and risks to people as well. Next slide. We will not be able to appeal Planning Act decisions under the new legislation. Formerly, some conservation authorities did do that when they disagreed with whether it was a municipal decision or a provincial decision. For our conservation authority, that would be a rare case. Having said that, I do think that clarification is being sought to make sure that where we are have legitimate standing, for example, we are the adjacent property owner to a Planning Act decision, that we would still have standing to do that. Next slide. So ultimately, there's a lot of discussion on the proposed changes. One thing that is also clarified in the Act is that conservation authorities do not or do no longer have, if this legislation is passed, the power to expropriate. And in areas where, whether it's through provincial or other issues, we don't have the resources to undertake some of this natural heritage and hazard work, I think that that's actually, perhaps from a liability perspective, a good thing for conservation authorities. There's a lot of discussion happening on these matters. And I certainly hope that if you have questions, you'll ask those to me now. And if you wish to make comments, that you'll take the opportunity to submit those. And I do know that Chair Fred has submitted some comments to the local MPP. So I think that, like I said, everyone will have a different type of perspective on some of this, but overall, we've tried very hard to meet the needs of a diverse watershed, and I think that we will continue to be able to do so. And I do hope, however, that standing committee takes some of the very serious types of questions that there will be about this proposed legislation quite seriously as they consider potentially amendments to this piece of legislation. Questions?
Yeah, could you send the contact for the standing committee around to everybody? So that we...
Yes, as soon as I'll dig that up. We'll put it to committee members and to the board and to municipalities as well, for sure. I will have to find it, Fred. I just did see it quickly come in, so I look forward to sending that out. And when you've got a conservation authority that's been around for 70 years, the whole thing is not always perfect. So we are always just trying our best to work with everyone to figure out the best path forward to protect as much as we can of this great little ecosystem that we call home. So, and share it with everyone that's interested. We have a question from Bill, I see.
And it's not a question as much as a comment. For everyone's information, one of the rules would change the membership pretty definitely, because right now the membership of the South Nation Conservation Authority is 7 councillors or mayors, and it's 5 public representatives or appointees. So that would change considerably, mentioning that one. Thank you.
Yeah. If I can say, there's also the thing of people who are no longer councillors who have been on the board and continue to represent their municipality. And then there's the problem we have in North Grenville is that we've got this tiny municipal council. When the Conservative government amalgamated our townships, we went from ordinary 5 to 7 member councils in each of the 3 municipalities down to 4 plus a mayor for the whole amalgamated municipality, and it would be a huge chunk out of the council's total time to have somebody be a board member on the RVCA and somebody to be a board member at SNC. So I think our council is going to squawk about that to the province.
I do think there's a number of municipalities have indicated that that's something that they find challenging. So I do expect that we'll hear something on that for sure. For sure. And Bill?
And I also agree that we'll hear more about this one. But the part that bothered me a little bit about this one, and I'm basing this on over the last 4 or 5 years, where I've been going to meetings in our Eastern Ontario region, talking about changes in the Conservation Authorities Act. And the real problem with it is that there are a few disgruntled municipalities that have had a concern. So they brought up these issues, and some of the MPPs brought them forward. In speaking with a few councillors and a few council members in my area and that I know, most of them had no idea that this was a factor. They didn't know of any concern. They hadn't thought of any concern. So this may be a concern to specific groups. I'm not sure.
So we shall see how everything unfolds in the days that come. We have been, to Toronto a number of times. We've made submissions to different committees, different ministers' offices a number of times. And I think at this time we're kind of, I don't expect that with the short agenda we'll, receive a standing, a submission to standing committee. I suspect that those will be fairly strategically allocated, but we will still send back in from the multiple levels of consultation on this. We had gathered about 75 resolutions of support at one particular point in time. So we will try to put those back on the table as these discussions move forward. So, but like I said, as I said, I really do appreciate all of the support that's been shown through what's been a fairly, difficult and challenging year with COVID, and certainly recognizing that this is, my tendency to discuss this in a rational mind is more my my wish to say that we've been through a lot of challenges before. We're still working hard. We're doing what we are committed to doing, and we'll remind everyone of our past submissions on this, and hopefully that those are well received. So that's my sort of presentation on the Bill 229 matters. I do expect that there will be a lot of discussion, and there has certainly been a lot of discussion coming from Toronto and other places. So we expect to see, some additional thoughtful debate on this piece before it is adopted. So, any other questions?
Thanks, Ange.
Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, everyone on the committee, for your time.
Just before we move on, can I just confirm who we have on the phone? 290-1023. I missed your name when you came in. I just want to make sure I have you recorded as present.
It's Doug.
It is
It's
Doug.
Doug Culver.
Perfect. Yeah. Good to see you, Doug. Or hear you, Doug.
Yeah, I was going to say you too.
I can see your phone number. So Doug is joining us, as you may recall. We don't have a replacement yet for him, but it's great to have him on board. So we're at item number 3, Mr. Chair, declarations of conflict of interest. And I'm not seeing any hands or any comments. So, Mr. Chair, we can move on to the number 4, SNC Fish and Wildlife Project update from staff. And the first slide is me. So you may recall I spoke about this project at the June and I believe September committee meetings. We have been working with local First Nations communities, Forest Ontario and Ontario Power Generation over the last year on a reconciliation and climate change planting project. And the project actually was planted on September 23rd of this year. We did have it set up as a public event. Unfortunately, with COVID numbers increasing, there were changes to public gathering numbers a few days before the event, and we had to scale it back from about the 60 registrants we had down to under 25. So we did have a small group with all the necessary precautions in place, masks and social distancing, and had a great planting event and opening ceremony for the Healing Place. The Healing Place is where we planted culturally significant trees. They're planted in the shape of a medicine wheel, and we're continuing to work with partners sort of on a communications piece to go along with that. With this project, it is planted on one of South Nation's properties in Edwardsburg Cardinal, just north of Shanley. We did receive some recognition. One of our partners, Forest Ontario, does have a monthly magazine called Treeline, and they did do a two-page spread on the project. It was an interview really with the working group, those of us that have been planning the event since about March of this year, and the groups continues to meet and work on projects and continues to build a relationship towards reconciliation. So I participate. Chris Craig from our office and Pat, when he's available, also is involved on those calls. And I see a hand up, but I'm not sure whose it is. It is Fred.
Well, it says Fred and Alita on my screen.
Yes.
Must be Alita in the kitchen.
Hi, Alita. Did you have a question? Okay, then we can move on. Michelle?
There.
Thanks, Ron.
Okay. I just realized that I was muted, so I unmuted.
Oh.
Quickly about the medicine wheel. Would there be, like, I see there's 4 different colors, four quadrats. Would there be like a separate species of tree in each one? How is that going to work?
So we planted a culturally significant tree at each of the 4 cardinal directions, so north, south, east, and west. And those trees are significant. I don't remember which is where now. I know we had a white pine, a cedar, an oak, and a maple, I think were the 4. Off the top of my head, I don't remember which is in which position, but they do hold a culturally significant location within the medicine wheel. And they vary between Algonquin and Mohawk traditions. So we have sort of a blend of the two when we did the plantings. So the next piece of the project that we're working on is a sign for the healing place, just to identify the location. And then we are working as a group as funding becomes available. We'd like to do additional signage at the site. Each tree would have a sign that would have then a link to a website. They would have information on why that tree is culturally significant to First Nations. So that's sort of the next piece of the puzzle that we're working on, is some additional signage and some education to go along with the site.
All right. This next slide is just an update on our county natural heritage planning study. If you'll recall, there was an update brought to you, I believe the last one was at the joint standing committee meeting. So the project is moving along. We're just finalizing draft maps of the natural heritage area in both counties. So that's the United Counties of Prescott and Russell and the United Counties of Stormont, Dundas, and Glengarry. We're going to be doing public consultation and engagement in the new year. So the plans are just being finalized on how exactly that's going to roll out, because obviously things have changed from our initial plans. So we're just working on that. And then at the end of all of this, the study is going to be included in both counties' official plans, and there's going to be some policies drafted that go along with it for natural heritage within those counties. So it's moving along, and stay tuned. We'll send out more information about the public consultation and how you can submit comments and feedback and get engaged in this project. The next slide is an update on a project in the East York Creek in Embrun. So this is a partnership project with Russell Township. This year, we did some tree planting along the creek to improve the buffer in a couple of areas. So you could see some nice big spruces planted, as well as over 100 potted trees and shrubs were planted as well. And then I believe there was around 15 of those big caliper-sized trees that were planted to improve the buffer in the area. And then there's also some erosion in a couple of spots along that creek. And we've submitted a funding application to the Great Lakes Local Action Fund to get some funding support along with the township to do some erosion repair work. And we're hoping to do some bioengineering in a couple of the areas there. So we'll see about that funding application, hopefully early in the new year. And this next slide is about our one of our conservation areas. So staff spent 6 days recently at Oak Valley Pioneer Park doing some tree removals. So there's some dead pine and spruce trees that were removed, and then a lot of pruning. About 75 trees were pruned in that park. So it looks quite different from what it was. If you haven't been there recently, maybe it's worth a trip to take a look at it now. And then this is also another spot where we're doing some erosion repair, hopefully with funding. So we also submitted an application to the Great Lakes Local Action Fund for this site as well. You can see in that bottom photo some of the erosion along the white pines there. But basically the whole length of the park, there's erosion. So we're hoping to do a demonstration site at this spot because the volunteers of Oak Valley Pioneer Park, they're very interested in education, and they like the idea of a demonstration site where we would showcase, again, hopefully a bioengineering technique in combination with some more traditional techniques to do some erosion repair there. And I see a question from Bill.
Thank you. More a comment. I was having trouble getting out of mute. It's just that Murray Inch does a lot of work there, and he was quite instrumental in working with North Dundas, and the township, a good partner, has now graveled the road in, which makes it a lot easier to access.
Yes, that's right. The roadway in looks really, really good. And the township has been supportive. They provide a grant every year that goes towards the maintenance in that park. So good partnerships all around for that one. Then, sorry, go ahead, Fred.
So what are you proposing to do to control that erosion?
We don't have a plan yet. So part of the proposal was to do a kind of a detailed survey of the site, have our engineering team come out and take a look at the site and focus on either, I don't know if there's a specific area we might focus on, but get them out to take a look at what is possible to do in that area, because we know there's a lot of ice in that area, which poses a problem. So it's going to be challenging, but we're hopeful we can get something done there.
Ooh, invasive Phragmites.
You're suggesting to put that in to stop the erosion?
Well, I mean, this is the whole thing. The landslides along the Mew and the Scarborough Bluffs in Scarborough. It looks like invasive Phragmites is taking care of the problem of those bluffs slumping, because it's just, the rhizomes go down 2 meters into the soil, and there's nothing's gonna influence them. And so, yeah, that's one of the things I've thought about many times is put some Phragmites there and it'd hold it in place.
That's
of course,
interesting.
We could try with native Phragmites, but it's not nearly as aggressive as the invasives are.
Yeah. Interesting.
And
then there's
like
it might be interesting to get sandbar willow and see if you could cover the bank with that, and because that makes a sort of fabric of roots and stuff, and then beavers. There's a lot of places where beavers farm that, and as soon as the stem gets to be an inch through, the beavers cut it and haul it away, and then it sprouts up again, and that makes it more like a sod of roots in the shoreline.
No, it's good feedback. Thank you. I thought I heard Doug there for a second. Doug, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, it's not like we're going to win the war against the invasive Phragmites. So I think Fred's got a good, maybe we can turn it to good instead of evil.
Yeah, that's a good point. So some of our other conservation areas, we are right now preparing the parks for winter operations. So our properties team has been very busy getting the parks cleaned up and closing the seasonal ones this month. Some conservation areas do remain open over the winter, and the trails are actually groomed. So if you like to cross-country ski or snowshoe or even just go for a walk, there's a few where the trails are groomed and they're open year-round. So they're good spots to go this winter. And the docks have all been removed from the river access points now. So they're all out, and the buoys are in for the buoys are out for all the water control structures. So if you are on the river, just keep that in mind as you get close to some of the dams and weirs that the buoys aren't there anymore. So, and we are seeing still a lot of usage in our conservation areas. So obviously all year we've seen it high numbers, and it's still keeping keeping going that way. So it's good news for our parks. Slide, Carl.
We're still doing a little bit of water quality monitoring this fall. We have been, some of them were cut short or delayed because of COVID, but we still have one more sample event for the Ottawa baseline and another one in early December for the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network. So it's keeping us busy, and the information, we'll have a little bit of a gap this year, unfortunately, because we weren't able to do some of our Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network. The labs weren't open earlier in the season because of COVID, so I think we got one in so far, and hopefully we'll have another one. But that may be the extent of our samples that we're able to get in this year. Next slide. The Western Chorus Frog Habitat Project. As you likely recall, we got some funding from Environment and Climate Change Canada to build some vernal pools. We selected 2 South Nation properties, SNC 45 and 156. 45 is in Bourget and 156 is down near Shanley. And we built 5 ponds at each site, and we've been monitoring them over the season as best as we could. Tried to make it out there monthly to take pictures of the water depths and to look for egg masses in the ponds. Unfortunately, we didn't see any chorus frog. The spring was very unusual. The calling was kind of spotty and a little bit delayed because it was a cold spring, but then it quickly went into heat. So by I was there on June 8th for some monitoring, and I was passing by on June 12th, and the ponds had dried up within the span of 4 days at the Shanley site. So I think that season, that hydro period, was a little bit too short for the Western chorus frog and many other amphibians to kind of properly use the ponds. So in 2021, what we're looking at, ECCC has said that they may have more money that they can put towards monitoring for us to go back and look at the ponds again. We also have the automatic recording units, which you see in the photo is the green boxes that we attach to the trees. They can be programmed to turn on at certain times for a certain amount of duration for intervals that occur throughout the day, and you leave them there for as long as you want. So they're really handy. They can be used for birds, frogs, anything that calls, even bats, I believe. So it's a nice little tool to have. We have 4 of these units that they've left with us, and we're talking about what we can do with them next year. Some ideas that were thrown around were, to take part in the breeding bird atlas survey, or just to look at what forest birds are on our properties and using our properties before and after harvests. That's some questions that Pat had about our properties. So I'm in the process of working on the final report, and last week there was also the chorus frog workshop, which was hosted by mainly researchers in Quebec. I liaised with a couple of them at the beginning of this program, Isabel, and the one that organized this was Véronique Vermette. She's a biologist and she's a consultant with a company in Quebec. So very interesting discussions that they shared on their research about chorus frogs, and that's about it. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. So I just wanted to update you on a new climate station that we've installed. So we're always looking for ways to improve our flood forecasting and warning, and we were able to tap into some Eastern Ontario Water Resource Program funding to get this station installed. We put it in within a known data gap in our network. It's just southwest of the community of Greeley within the city of Ottawa. And it actually fills in a known data gap for our friends at Rideau Valley Conservation Authority to the west of us. So I know they're using data that's being transmitted from this station as well. Basically, what we're looking at is an all-weather precipitation gauge. The station measures temperature, humidity, barometric pressure, soil moisture. And all of that data is collected on an hourly basis and transmitted over the GOES satellite network so that we get it near real time within our own water information system at our office at SNC, and it can be used immediately within our processes here for flood forecasting and warning, and as well as low water response.
See a question, I think, from Bill Cat.
Oh, sure thing.
Okay, I think I'm live now. The question I had was, I heard you say that, and I know that the information is relayed to us directly and quite quickly. I heard you say that the Rideau can access it. Can Rideau and other authorities access all information that we have, or on request, or how does that work?
So because we are part of the same water information hub as Rideau Valley and 9 other conservation authorities in Eastern Ontario, we'll frequently share data if it's useful to each other, such as climate information. And so that's how Rideau Valley can access. I know the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry also taps into our station and uses our weather data occasionally as well. And they're able to do that because we can share the ID with them, and they can take a look at data that's being transmitted over GOES using that special ID.
I think that's excellent.
Good afternoon, everybody. If you follow environmental legislation, you may have noticed that some changes were posted for the Endangered Species Act on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. So to give a quick rundown on the main thing proposed, there is a regulatory change proposed to create a new agency, a provincial agency that will be governed by a board of directors to oversee what is being called a Species at Risk Conservation Fund for Ontario. So essentially, this agency will see that municipalities or businesses or individuals that wish to harm or destroy the habitat of a species at risk, or that species itself, will have the option to pay into a conservation fund as an offset to their work or development that's going to impact the species. So the funds from these received through this process will then be pooled and will allow this new agency to then determine the best way and location to recover and protect that species. And this will be done on a province-wide scale. So where the money is coming from doesn't necessarily mean that's where it's going to be applied in the province. So this will also only apply to 6 species at the start, which were chosen because they are most commonly impacted by development. And they've also been shown to, or they're anticipated to benefit from strategic funding and habitat offsetting in the province. There are a few other changes, minor changes, under the Endangered Species Act as well that are posted to the registry, and I'm not going to go through them all now. 2 webinars were hosted last week to provide updates on how this is going to impact current work. And the bill, or the changes are posted, like I said, on the Environmental Registry of Ontario. SNC will be putting together some comments and setting them into Conservation Ontario, who will then pool all the comments and send in a coordinated comment from the CAs of Ontario and sort of a stance on the changes that are proposed. So, like I said, the comment period is now open until December 19th for comments from anyone who wishes to take a look at those changes.
Thank you, everyone. That brings us to item 5, Mr. Chair of the agenda, the approval of the meeting minutes from our September 1st meeting. And they're in your package starting on page 3. So we'll be looking for a motion to approve those minutes. And I see Kirk and Malcolm moved in second. Are there any questions or any notes for edits to the minutes on pages 3 through 6? I see a hand up. Let me just see who it is. Bruce. Bruce, you're muted. You'll just need to unmute. Oh. Okay, I don't think that was a question. So I'm not hearing any questions, Mr. Chair. So the recommendation is that the committee approve the meeting minutes for the Fish and Wildlife Committee virtual meeting of September 1st, 2020.
Okay. Is anyone oh, Bill has his hand up. Oh, was that was a vote in favor?
I think it was a vote in favor.
Yeah, I was just too quick, Mr. Chair. I was voting in favor. Sorry.
Okay. I think we'll be doing it negatively, and we'll only ask if anybody's opposed.
Sounds good. I'm not seeing any opposition, Mr. Chair, so that is carried. We didn't note any business arising, but if there's anything you would like to have a follow-up on, now is the time to ask your question. And I'm not seeing any, so we can move on to our new business. And first up is the 2020 year-end report from Michelle on page 7 of the package.
Thanks, Rhonda. So this is our annual report that we bring to the committee, which summarizes our activities that we undertook throughout the year. Obviously, this year there were some unanticipated changes due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Fortunately, we were pretty lucky. The majority of our activities proceeded with only some minor modifications, especially in the early part of the pandemic. We had to adjust how we undertook some of our field work, and like Naomi mentioned, adjust to some changes based on other agencies. So the Provincial Water Quality Monitoring Network, the provincial lab was closed, so we weren't able to do that program. But for the most part, we were fairly successful in continuing on with what we had planned. So the report just outlines, high level what we completed in 2020. So the South Bear Brook catchment study we had some field work that was associated with that we were able to complete. So there was some trap nets set to collect fish. We put out water temperature loggers. We did some radon sampling for base flow identification. And then we had some benthic sampling as well that we did for that. And then there was the water quality monitoring that Naomi already touched on. As well, we had some sonde units deployed, taking hourly readings that we deployed and then retrieved in the fall. And that data is all downloaded and will be analyzed. We also did some targeted invasive species removals. Naomi has received her license to apply the pesticides, so that's great news for us. So we were able to do that in-house. So we did some removals of Phragmites at the Robert Graham Conservation Area around the big ponds that we constructed with OPG funding a couple years ago, as well as at our La Rose Forest OPG site and just off the Finley Creek Boardwalk as well. We did some work there. So we will keep checking on those sites. So we'll be back next year taking a look at those sites to see if there's follow-up work that has to be done. We also assessed our drain blocking project that we did in 2018 in the Leitrim wetland, as well as looked at the survival of the plants that we put in along the north-south swale in the Finley Creek community, and that swale drains into Finley Creek. So we did a lot of planting along there to improve the buffers. So that project was assessed. We also received funding from Fisheries and Oceans Canada to do some sampling on municipal drains that were not classified so that they could then receive a classification. So Brent's just finishing up the final report for that, and we'll be sending all the data off to DFO, and they'll use it to come up with a classification. And then we did some plant identification and inventory at the watershed evaluation of beneficial management practices for agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. That's something Naomi's been doing for the past few years now, is supporting them with that work. And then City Stream Watch, that was one of the programs that was we had to adjust. So we weren't able to have volunteers come out with us this year. So instead we modified a bit, and Brent actually created a new Survey 123 application that streamlined our data collection and really helped us tailor the information we do collect so that it meets our needs, not just for City Stream Watch, but also for other programs. So our engineering team, for example, is really interested in erosion. So we looked at how the information we collect could be useful to them. And then Naomi and Brent went out and did a section of the Upper Bear Brook just west of Conroy Road to see how the app worked and figure out if we need to make any tweaks or changes. And hopefully next year we'll see maybe things will be a little bit more normal and we'll be able to have volunteers come out with us again. So we'll see how that goes. In terms of projects, the Species at Risk Benefits Exchange is still ongoing. It's a 20-year project, if you remember. So you'll be seeing this one for the next 12 years or so on here. So we monitored the 35 hectares of habitat that was restored for bobolink and eastern meadowlark. And bobolink were seen on all 3 properties. And actually, eastern meadowlark was observed at the Upper Canada Migratory Bird Sanctuary for the first time. We hadn't seen that species yet at any of the 3 sites, so that was exciting. And we had nesting bobolink on SNC 97 at one of our properties just east of Berwick. So the habitat's doing well. We didn't have to mow it this year because it was just done last fall. So we're just going to keep an eye on it. Next year we'll be doing just some general habitat monitoring and keep an eye on that and probably do some mowing next year again as well. Then we report to the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry and Lindsay Solar, which is the permit holder for that project. And then under OPG, we did a little bit of work on the Gamble property and Garlandside Road properties. Naomi went out and identified and mapped the extent of the buckthorn infestation at Garlandside Road, because that's one of the targets for that project, is to remove, to go in and treat that buckthorn and try and get a handle on that infestation. And then we also had some drone aerial imagery of Gamble that was digitized, and a detailed work plans being prepared for approval by Ontario Heritage Trust, because they are the actual landowners of the Gamble property and we just manage the property. So we need they've approved kind of in principle, but we just have to send them kind of a detailed work plan to get their kind of final sign off for that. And then the J. Henry Tweed Conservation Area, we're doing stream erosion repair is the target for that project. So this year we deployed water level loggers in the stream because we've noticed increased flow rates in that stream in past years, and we wanted to figure out where that was coming from and why. We've done a survey to confirm some of the boundaries of the conservation area. And as well, we've gone out with some of the engineering team to take a look at some of the past erosion repair work, as well as taking a look at which sites we want to target for 2021. So the engineering team is going to be looking at starting some design work for those sites over this winter. And then the Western Chorus Frog habitat.
Michelle, I see Fred has his hand up, so maybe.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I just wonder, this is something I've sort of wondered about. With the buckthorn, you herbicide, you cut down and herbicide the mature plants, and how much of a seed bank do the buckthorn species have? Because I know anytime I disturb anything around here, I immediately get both species of buckthorn coming up as seedlings.
Yeah, and that's part of that. We've seen that in a few projects where we've done buckthorn control. You can just see wherever it's, the canopy is a little more open, there's lots of little seedlings. And I think of Leitrim as one example. I know we've been a little bit discouraged by the amount of buckthorn seedlings in that area. So part of what we want to do at the Garland Side Road property is replant, because the buckthorn extent is the worst where there was an old mill on the property, so it was an open area. And then Naomi's she's seen where it's there's been incursions from that central location. So we want to try and replant basically that central location, try to build up the canopy again, and to try and limit some of that seedling growth. But it's an ongoing management effort for that property. It won't be just a 1-year thing. It'll have to become part of the management plan for the property to stay on top of that for sure.
And is it known how long the seeds remain viable if they're in the seed bank in the ground?
I am not sure. I don't know if anyone else knows the specific. I know it's long. I've heard it's long, but I don't know exactly the number.
Yeah, we should look at that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, and then the last piece was on the Western Chorus Frog project, and Naomi already did a really good job of summarizing that one from the slideshow. So that's just an update on 2020 activities. So if there's any other questions, be happy to answer them.
Oh, there was one.
Yes, I have one. Can you tell us where under page 8, under projects, the 3 grassline sites are, and how are they financed?
Sure. So the 3 sites are SNC 97, which is just east of Berwick. It's pretty much at the corner of County Road, I believe it's 9, and the Boundary Road.
I know where.
And then the next one is in North Dundas. It's SNC 114. It's at the end of Nation Valley Road. It's where it used to be the old Skeet Club property. So it's right at the end of the dead end road there. There's that property. And then the third is at the Upper Canada Migratory Bird Sanctuary. So we actually have an agreement with the Parks of the St. Lawrence to have the habitat at that site. So, and all the work for the restoration was funded by the solar company. So the Lindsay Solar has what's called an overall benefit permit from the province. So they were able to build a solar facility on bobolink and eastern meadowlark habitat because of this permit, but they had to recreate that habitat elsewhere. And so South Nation was partnered with them to provide that habitat for them, and they cover the cost of the restoration work and of the monitoring work and any maintenance for that 20-year period. So any mowing we have to do to maintain the grassland is covered by the solar company.
Thank you.
And do you just mow, or is there any burning involved?
We don't burn. We just have mowing right now as the activity we do. I've heard of prescribed burns for projects like this, but at this point we're just doing the mowing.
Yeah, there's Val DeZille at the Rice Lake Plains. You might want to talk to her about, I'll send you her email address to
sure
what they do for burning to maintain. What they're trying to do is native grass prairie. And,
okay.
And I wonder if these fields were burned once in a while, once every 5 years or so, if it might encourage native species to come in among the grasses and the herbs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd appreciate the contact for sure.
There are no additional questions. The resolution on page 7 is that the Fish and Wildlife Committee receive and file the 2020 year-end report. And I see moving Bruce and second Larry. There are no objections to that. Mr. Chair, you can call your question.
Okay. Are there objections?
And I see none, so that is carried. I think Michelle's up next again.
Yep. Thanks, Rhonda. So the next report is on page 10 of your package. This is the an update on funding submissions that staff have worked on over the past little while. So it's just a high level kind of summary of which grants we've applied to for which projects and whether we've heard back or not. And then the amount. So you can see there's quite the list there. And this isn't even all of it. We are working right now on National Disaster Mitigation Program funding grants. They're due December 1st. So those ones will have to be added to the list as well. But you can see there's a bunch that were approved. So that was, good news for us. A couple denied, which is, always the case. And then there's a whole bunch that are pending. So those Great Lakes local action funds that I mentioned for the erosion control work
Is now joining.
So those funds were submitted November 6th. So we're hopefully we'll hear back in the next little while from those. We also submitted a couple of grants to the Climate Action and Awareness Fund and on November 6th as well. So those are also pending. So we will hopefully hear back from those fairly quickly. And then we're always keeping an eye out for more. So we're pretty fortunate to get notifications when these calls for proposals come out. But if you see of any and you think we might not know about it, feel free to send them along. And I know we're always keeping our eye out as well. And staff are really good about securing funding for different projects. So just any questions on any of them?
I see Bill's hand up.
Thank you. Yes. If we get all of the grants that are listed here, are any of them 100%, or do we have to in each case supply 50% with it?
Some of them are 100%. So those Great Lakes Local Action Fund grants, the $50,000 ones, those are 100%. There was no requirement for matching funding for those. The Climate Action and Awareness Fund, Rhonda can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe those are cost shares, aren't they?
No, they were up to 100%
Those
as
were 100?
well.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we always do show some in kind through our staffing and our other resources here at South Nation. So although you're not required to put in 100%, they score the grants as they review them. So of course, those that have matching do receive higher scores. So we do have not 50-50, but we do have a percentage of in-kind resources in staffing and equipment and vehicles and things like that are part of those submissions.
Thank you.
One of the ones that would be 50-50, Bill, would be the Water and Erosion Control Infrastructure Program. Those grants are 50-50 grants.
Yes, and then National Disaster Mitigation ones that we're working on right now are also 50-50. So it's unusual to see them at 100%. We were sort of surprised with the Climate Action and the Great Lakes ones when they announced them in October that they were at 100%. We hadn't seen that before from previous programs from those streams. All right, so I did hear Sean join us. Welcome, Sean. We're on page 10 of the funding submission report in the agenda. The recommendation, you're welcome. The recommendation is on page 10 that the Fish and Wildlife Committee receive and file the grant submission update. And I see it moved by Malcolm and seconded by Stefan. And if there are no additional questions, Mr. Chair, you can seek approval on that recommendation.
Do we have objections?
Seeing none. So we can move on to the last report in new business is page 13, and it's myself, and it's our meeting schedule for 2021. So again, we like to set the meeting dates at the last meeting of the year so that we can all get them into our calendars in plenty of time to save the dates. So I'm proposing the same meeting schedule that we saw this year. So again, March 4th would be our big meeting day with all of the committees. So the Joint Standing Committee at 1 p.m. and this committee meeting at 3. June 1st for the June meeting, June 7th for the September meeting, and November 30th for the last meeting of the year. I'd just like to note that given we suspect the ongoing pandemic will require us to continue meeting virtually for at least part of next year. So that March meeting is almost guaranteed to be virtual unless something changes significantly over the winter. And then we'll need to see closer to the June date sort of where we are with provincial health authority guidelines as far as COVID-19. So at this point, we will have a hybrid next year of hopefully an opportunity to meet in person, but at least the first and possibly second meetings for sure will be virtual like today. So if anyone, sort of any of those dates jump out as a date that's not good for you, if you could let us know now and we can adjust. We have the ability if we need to adjust mid-year too, but it's kind of nice to get them in our calendars early. So I'm looking for a resolution to approve the meeting schedule that's on page 13.
Well, if I can sort of interrupt here, maybe the joint meeting should be pushed to later in the year because there'd be a better chance that people have been vaccinated and could meet in person, because it'd be just chaotic to have everybody from all the committees on one Zoom meeting.
Okay, we can have that discussion. I think the other committees have approved it right now, but it's a good point, Fred. And I think a lot of it will be playing by ear sort of as we get through the winter. So I will keep that certainly in mind, and we can see if we're still, you know, it probably will be virtual, whether or not it makes sense to move it later in the year. So it's a good point, and I'll make note of that. So if we can at least hold the 4th for the Fish and Wildlife Committee meeting, and we'll let you know if the joint meeting moves based on Fred's good point there. Not seeing any hands or hearing any objections. Okay, so if have Alvin move and Sean second, you can plug those dates in your calendar. And again, at each prior meeting, we will confirm the date with you.
Okay. And do we have objections? Has anybody ever voted against anything at any of these meetings?
It's rare. You're a very mendable group. So that brings us to the end of the new business. Angela did cover the supplemental agenda, which was her presentation at the beginning. We didn't have any correspondence to include in the package, so that brings us down to number 10, roundtable discussions on community engagements, and followed by watershed monitoring. So, Mr. Chair, I guess we could open the floor if anyone wants to share on community engagements. I see Bill's hand has gone up. We can start with Bill.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wanted to mention to everyone that at the September meeting, which was our annual meeting of South Nation, we actually had a change in our executive. So the changes are, the new chair is George Darroux, councillor from Ottawa. The vice chair is Pierre Leroux, mayor of Russell. The past chair is myself, Bill Smurl. Doug Thompson, who has been on South Nation in various capacities for almost 20 years, just lacks a month or two of 20 years, actually is retiring or is retired at this stage. But it was announced earlier today that he has been given another position with the province, and perhaps he wants to say a word about it just a little bit later, but congratulations to Doug on that one. So the new executive, I've mentioned who they are. At our November meeting, the budget for 2021 was approved, and that's been being circulated to all people as we speak. I like Fred's suggestion about giving thought to making that joint meeting a little later. perhaps June or later would be a date that could be acceptable as we move on. And regarding community engagement activities, one of the things I've done for the last number of years, and I'm doing it again this year on behalf of Chair George and Vice Chair Pierre, is I get copies of the budget, the approved budget, and deliver them personally to the United Counties of Leeds, Grenville, so they have a copy at their Brockville office for the warden and for the warden and the staff there. I get one to SD&G in Cornwall, and I get one to Prescott Russell at their headquarters. So each of them gets that. Plus, in SD&G, there are 5 municipalities, but only 3 have representation. So I make it a point to deliver a budget copy and keep in touch with the mayor of North Glengarry and the mayor of South Stormont. So it's just a way of sharing information and a little bit of public relations and a little bit of contacting and being available to answer extra questions. And I think it's good for the organization to share. The last point I wanted to make was I wanted to say a special thank you and compliments to the staff for the last 9 months. They planted many trees. Many people in the spring were involved in tree planting that hadn't been before. The staff has been working remotely, has been working on site, has been working in various capacities. They've achieved a heck of a lot, and most of the objectives they had for the year have been met. So congratulations and thanks to them, and we hope that things are going to change slightly, but it sure was a good year for achievement. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Okay. And what do we have for community engagement among other people, even if everybody had to stay 2.5 meters apart from everybody else? One of the things that Amy, Ivany, and I have been doing in the North Grenville Environmental Advisory Committee is trying to get the representatives on the boards of the conservation authorities to have a higher profile in the municipal government, and they've just been sending in the minutes of the board meetings, and they haven't been asked by council to present how the minutes relate to the municipality, either directly to the council or to our advisory committee, and we're sort of working on that to get the profile of the conservation authorities a little higher in the community.
Mr. Chair, in North Dundas, every 4 to 6 weeks, I do a presentation to the council, and it's to give them an update on what's happening generally, and specifically what the involvement there is in with South Nation in North Dundas, and they seem to always appreciate these updates. And they appreciate it to the extent that now I'm considered one of their standing committees. And when I have a report, I send it in a week in advance, and it's included in the agenda. And then I present at the meeting and answer questions with councillors, and it's always accepted and voted on and achieved. I've never had it rejected yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe you could send me an email saying what you do, and I can use that as leverage.
Thank you. I will, and if you don't get it in a few days, jog my memory. And what I would probably do is just forward you 1 or 2 of the ones I've presented. Would that be okay?
Okay.
And as I said, they're mostly about North Dundas, but I do it generally as well.
Right.
Are there any others that want to share anything from their organizations as far as community engagement? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Chair, if you want to touch on watershed monitoring, I know that you had a report. I saw Larry sent one in as well.
Oh, I've scarcely been in the South Nation watershed. I don't know. We went all the way up. Well, we had a contract with Fisheries and Oceans to look for the hickory nut or Arbovaria olivaria, which was premised on continuation of the drought. But the negotiations for the contract took us into August, and by the time we had the contract, it started to pour, and all the creeks went up, and the way we looked for them, we couldn't find anything. So we found one shell in the course of the whole summer, which was our major field work. So I don't really have anything. I'll fill in the form that I sent around, but it's going to be based on stuff in the Rideau drainage mostly.
Great. Larry, did you want to share anything from the update you emailed around? You'll just need to unmute yourself.
I'd just like to make sure that it went to Michelle. I didn't send it. I forgot to send it to Michelle.
I see it in my. I'll make sure she gets it.
I'm tickled to death that the erosion is going to be taken care of at Oak Valley, because that's always been a bee in my bum. And if we can do anything with that, I'm just over the moon about it. And that's all I have to comment.
Thanks, Larry. And I know you've mentioned in the past that section of the river from kind of Oak Valley to Cass Bridge could use some work. So it's one that we keep bringing up as well internally. So it's just a matter of we'll keep finding those grants and hopefully get some funding to do some of that work. So.
And I just forwarded your email to Michelle, so she definitely has it now, Larry.
Thank you.
Okay, so that brings us to number 11, the next meeting date. So again, we'll confirm that joint standing meeting. We'll have some discussions here on whether it makes sense to move it later in the year. So we will confirm the joint at 1 o'clock, but definitely pen in March 4th at 3 o'clock for this committee to meet. And I'm not sure, Mr. Chair, if anybody has anything last minute before we adjourn, but now would be the time to bring it up.
How about, Mr. Chair? I wish everyone a great Christmas season, although it may be pretty quiet, and a good start to the new year when we hope that we'll have vaccinations and we'll have all sorts of things breaking for us.
Right. And,
I saw
and how about some important herbivore taking over buckthorn?
Yes, Stefan has his hand up. Go ahead, Stefan.
Yes, I was just wondering, was there any issue arising from the 2-week deer hunt that we had recently? Was there anything reported by staff, major issue on non-compliance or any sort of complaint coming from the public or even the hunter in general?
Not that I've heard of. I don't know, Michelle, have you heard anything? I think it was fairly quiet.
I haven't heard anything. I know I wanted to get a hunting slide up with kind of some of the statistics and what we've seen, but unfortunately Ryan couldn't be here. He'd be the best to talk about that. He's been dealing with hunter inquiries, and I know we've issued 113 permission letters for our properties. So. People are out there using the properties, but yeah, I haven't heard anything, but Naomi has her hand up. Maybe Naomi has some more details.
Yeah, I sit not too far away from Ryan, so I had, some discussions with him about the issues, and there was a few cases of people that had posted no hunting signs on some South Nation property, and they were kind of keeping it for themselves, and a boundary dispute. So Chris and Ryan were actually pretty busy the first week or more of the opening of the season to go and to check out calls that they had from people complaining about why there was signs there, and then just having to make arrangements to go in and look for the signs and take them down, and then talk to area landowners to find out who did it. But it was, I think, pretty par for the course that we often have those little kinds of things happen that are usually resolved pretty quickly. And so I don't think there was any other major issues beyond that.
And I can just add, I know that Chris was out installing some additional boundary signs. So I know that some folks often mistake South Nation property for Crown land. So we have been making a concerted effort over the last several years to mark our boundaries with signage so that folks do know that it is a South Nation property. So that was ongoing, and I know he put a bunch of them up before hunting season this year as well.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Okay, I'm seeing no more hands, Mr. Chair. So I have Kirk moving adjournment at 4:20. Oh, I saw a hand go.
If I may make a comment, Rhonda.
You may. Go ahead.
If Michelle's on the money on 113 permission slips, that means that SNC took in approximately $11,000 on the hunting program, which once again, the revenue stream is significant.
Yes, and that does help support our youth hunt camp and our fish camps, as well as improvements on our properties. So it's a good point, Larry. Thanks for bringing it up right before we called adjournment. So great comment to end on. So, Mr. Chair, we can officially adjourn at 4:21.
Unless there's majority opposed.
Good holiday season to all, and be safe.
Right. And
Take care, everyone.
Anybody wants to come to Mud Puppy Night, we're doing it every Friday.
By appointment, right, Fred?
Yes, you have to go